Brilliant, thank you. So this afternoon, you get myself and Ben to share our knowledge and experience with you. So I'm Sarah. I've met a few of you. I've certainly met Karen before, who joined our Teach Earth team earlier last month. So I've worked for Earthwatch for some time, and I get involved in events for Earthwatch, things like Tiny Forest Science Days, schools events, workshops, conferences, kind of you name it, I get involved. And then outside of Earthwatch, I'm also involved in running wildlife discovery days at my local nature reserve. I run an explorer group. I've done promotion events for scouts, set up an eco club. So I wear many hats in this arena, and was also involved quite heavily in a project that we ran in Birmingham, which was particularly focusing on engaging local community members. So I hope to bring to you today some of the sort of pearls of wisdom that we've picked up over the time, and also give everybody on this call an opportunity to share some of their own successes and top tips as to how to kind of build an inclusive community. Ben is also kindly joining us today, and it will offer his expertise as a tiny forest project manager, and be able to kind of share with you and answer some of your specifically tiny forest type questions. But I'm sure you're all incredibly knowledgeable about them, so we can keep questions to Ben to a minimum, but honestly feel free to kind of share any of your thoughts as we go along. So the order of today is really to get you thinking about how you improve your inclusivity and your connectivity within your tiny forest. So thinking about how people currently connect with your tiny forest, what your tribe currently looks like, who's currently involved, what barriers might exist to people to getting involved, how can we remove some of those barriers, and then some sort of shared experiences, pitfalls, lessons learned, top tips. And there'll be a chance at the end for questions and discussion. Is that what people signed up for? Was that the session you were planning to join? Bam. Okay. So what I'm just going to do is share. I'm just going to find the Jamboard to share. So if we move to, there we go. So for those who are jamming, oh, that's a slow burn. Hold on, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. Bear with me. There we go. Copy. And then, like magic. Ah, no, it doesn't work now, does it? That's no good. I've touched the wrong thing. Let me. Right. Why are we not sharing correctly? All right. Just bear with me. How did I manage to get it to work first thing, and now it doesn't like me? Right, let's try. What have I done wrong? Apologies, everybody. This is a bit rubbish. I'm really sorry about this. What are people seeing?
I'm just on your PowerPoint, not the presenter view, just
okay.
yeah.
Sorry about this. That'll teach me. Right, hold on. Sorry about this. Are we back in action?
Nope, still just seeing the Zoom screen. What are you after, Sarah? Do you need the board link or?
I did, but I'm just sorry. I'm really sorry about this, folks.
If we just paste the link into the chat, can people?
That's what I was trying to do, but unfortunately, as I came out of the presentation, I've now not been able to go back in. Why not?
So I've got the link out of your presentation notes. If I just stick it in the chat, will folk be able to?
Yeah, that's fine. I just can't seem to get it to come back. Why is this not playing?
And we've still got your notes, but we can certainly see the slide.
Any still the same?
Yeah, we've got full size slides now.
Gosh, sorry. And this is a classic example of how not to share the screen. I'd much rather do this face to face, but there we go. So now that I've wasted some of your time, let's move on to how people currently connect to your tiny forest. So it would be really useful if you could pop in the chat which forest that you are with and how you currently engage with or connect to your tiny forest. There we go. That's brilliant. So, Forest 24, Hammersmith, brilliant. Okay, so we've got a sort of a mixed bag of lots of different forests representing, which is fantastic, but a kind of mixed experience of being able to connect in with some of the local community. That's fine. And I want you to begin thinking about how people currently connect to your tiny forest. So do they tend to physically connect to it? Do they come and visit? And if so, what do they do? Do they talk about it? Is it something that comes up in conversation locally? Do they share pictures about it or like the pictures that you share? And do other local groups visit the site and see it as their own? So if you can begin to be kind of thinking about how you're currently enabling people to access the site. I'm aware from some of the other sessions we've done like this that it can feel quite a challenge in terms of getting people involved. And hopefully from the session today, we'll give you some kind of ideas and top tips about how to make that a bit of an easier process, but also a less lonely process. As someone who gets involved in lots of activities, I know how frustrating it can be when it feels like you're just the only person that's getting involved. Okay. So it sounds like there's a few of you sort of sharing photos on school sites. Okay, little more. Oh, brilliant. Okay, so you've got school visits twice a week. I assume that's Karen. Is that William Talbot? So on a school site, there's a lot being used. There we go. Oh, that's interesting. So the Littlemore site, the It sounds like the service users use it, but actually maybe the staff don't know about it. Okay, what else have we got? Hammersmith Park is really well hidden and hard to find unless you know. Okay, there we go. And obviously, yeah, so what you will get with some of the sites is there'll be a bit more of a target audience than others. And obviously you want to try and encourage local users first. Okay, so let's move to the next slide. So again, thinking about what does your tribe currently look like? So how many tree keepers have you got involved? Are the local school involved? And who seems to be the most active? And who drops in and drops out? And I guess mainly getting you to think about, do you know where they come from? Do you know what it is that interests them? Do you know why they visit, and also why they come back? There we go. So I'm going to do a moment is, oh no, I'm not going to do that. Oh. There we go. Let's go back to what is it I keep pressing that makes this a complete nightmare? Right, hold on a minute. Let's go that, and then stop sharing, and then why won't it share? There we go. Okay, so let's begin to think about what some of the barriers might be to connecting to your tiny forest. There we go. Here are some, that's not an exclusive list, but I'm sure that quite a few of these will resonate with you joining today's session. So the first one is kind of interest. So is there an interest in coming to the forest? Do people know about it? Do people understand how they might benefit from it, how they might get engaged? Is there, or are there, any sort of physical barriers? So one of the things that we are looking at over as we plant more tiny forests and think about the design is, what can we do to improve the design that will enable more people to physically access it? Are there geographical challenges? So I know one of you's already said most people don't know where it is. It's hidden away. For some sites, there may be challenges around how people access it, thinking about public transport, thinking about parking. There's a whole range of kind of physical geographical features that might be a challenge. Is time a barrier? We ran a session a few weeks ago looking at how do you recruit more volunteers, and quite often the time challenge is there for getting more people involved. Is it a knowledge thing? So is it that people don't know what it's about? Is there something that we can do to improve in terms of sharing information? Are there cultural barriers? So is it seen as an unusual place to visit? Is it somewhere that is in an area that certain members of the community wouldn't visit? And are there some just general negative perceptions around it? So is it just seen as a strange fenced area that suddenly appeared and people don't kind of really understand how they might connect in with it? So let's kind of think about what some of the potential solutions to that might be. So firstly, thinking about interest. So get to know your audience and make activities at the forest relevant. So do a bit of research, do a bit of market research, find out what people currently know, think about those who already come to the tiny forest, and try and get to the bottom of what it was that brought them there in the first place. And also think about what motivated you to get involved with the tiny forest. If it motivated you, then chances are it will motivate others. From a physical design perspective, what is it that needs to happen to make it more accessible for all abilities? And that will differ for each tiny forest site, depending on who it is that wants to connect and get involved. And we're always looking to improve the equity of the design and the inclusivity of the design. So if there's anything that you've noticed that actually would improve access for more people, then please do share. Geographical. Have you connected to the group that exists closest to the site? Is there a local community centre? Is there a football team? Is there a sports club? Try and link in with people that already exist in groups, and share with them the benefits of the tiny forest. One thing that we certainly learned from the work in Birmingham was that there were people who were interested, who were perhaps a little bit further afield from directly connected to the site, and so we looked at offering minibuses or transport to try and get people involved. Time, always a challenge, especially if I'm aware that lots of you put in a lot of time and energy into making your tiny forest work. But think about offering bite-sized sessions, have activities during the day, in the evening, or at the weekends to appeal to a wider number of people. Knowledge, so make finding out about tiny forests easier. Share information sheets, have posters, displays, and reward those that take part. So find opportunities to share that knowledge. We ran one of these sessions last month, and we were particularly looking at communications. So think about all the different mechanisms and channels that you have for promoting the tiny forest, the events, and information about it. Cultural. Think about local communities and work with them to really understand what their needs are and what, if any, are the barriers that are specifically stopping them from getting involved. Again, we sort of recognise that it will take a bit of time to connect out to the local community, but you will sort of reap the rewards if you really understand what it is that they need from the tiny forest. And perceptions. One of the biggest challenges that I've encountered when looking at developing green spaces to really encourage local communities to get involved is around making sure that the spaces are seen as safe, that there are places that people want to be. So things like litter picks, community days, building in those links means that people can really see that it's a space that's looked after, and it's a place that people want to come along to. So thinking about how inclusive your tribe is, here are some points to ponder. So think about who's currently involved in your group, think about who's missing, think about how your group and the tiny forest is perceived locally, and how might you find out? How are you communicating about the tiny forests? Are you using as many channels as you can? And remember that different audiences need different approaches. Think about the kind of events that you're trying to encourage people to come to. How inclusive are they? And are they the best way of connecting in? And also think about what other local groups do. So find out what other groups are inclusive, which do have a lot of community members joining in, and what can you learn from them and from their approach. Now, here are, again, not an exclusive kind of list of sort of practical tips of how you might make your tiny forest more inclusive, and through that, hopefully, increase the number and diversity of the tribe that you've got at your forest. So the first one would be the ideal, which is having a collective vision. So make time to bring everyone together to share a vision for what that tiny forest might look like. and in your approach to doing that, model inclusive behaviours. And what I mean by that is, if you want to increase the diversity and inclusion of people involved in the tiny forest activities, make sure that the way that you approach people, the way that you promote the forest, your communications, the kind of activities are ones which are open to all. Easy to access. So have processes that are easy to understand and that they really welcome volunteers. Seek out any barriers that may exist for volunteers and then take action to remove them. It's a challenge to get people to sign up to activities, but don't add extra kind of layers of bureaucracy if you want to try and get as many people involved as possible. Know your gifts. So for this, I mean, is really celebrate the skills in your local community. And adapt any of the kind of volunteer roles and activities to meet those needs. If you've got people in the community who are particularly great at running events and activities, you can get those along. I've always found it's excellent to work with the local WI in terms of making cakes for events and activities. So find out what it is that people are good at and how they can share those skills with the Tiny Forest group. Plan and adapt. I think this is the sort of classic, just be flexible, things will change. There will be some activities and events that you run and nobody comes, and there'll be some that you run and hundreds of people will come, and you just have to adapt and learn from your experiences. Measure. Now this is an interesting one around how you will know if you've achieved your goals. So a really useful approach is to collect data and information to understand who volunteers for you and why. And we can talk at the end of this session about different methods of doing that. But if you've got somebody who does turn up regularly or even occasionally, really talk to them and find out what it is that motivated them to come in the first place. Legal and risk. It's a simple rule, be safe and legal. And if you're unsure, then ask. Prioritize your actions. So funnel resources where they can have the greatest impact. So if you think the best way of getting more people involved is to really throw some energy into supporting the science days, then do that. There's probably only a small group of you, so use the skills that you've got to the way you can have the greatest impact. Tool up. So just map out your gifts, your equipment, your skills, find out what you can borrow. So if you're thinking about events or activities, what is it that you need in order to make that happen? A lot of community activities are being run through kind of shared resources and shared tools, etc. So find out other ways to connect in with your local community by sharing those resources. Dynamic dynamos. So there is usually one or two kind of key people within a community who are the movers and shakers. And they're the ones that it's really important to connect with. They might not necessarily be the ones that are most interested in the tiny forest at the starting point, but if you can work with them to show the benefits and also to listen to them about what it is they're looking for, you will reap the rewards of bringing those into the tiny forest fold. The money matters. Think about accessing sort of small grants. So again, look at opportunities to kind of build the activities that you're involved with. Partners and allies. So be in the spaces where people are. Help people connect to nature. Use existing networks. And involve a range of partners and allies. So they can be volunteers, they can be community, they can be financial, political, or experts in their field. Tap into the local wildlife groups. Find ways to bring in people to support the work that you're already doing. Ask questions and listen. So encourage and support volunteers to be themselves and to listen to what matters to them. It's really easy to go in with some ideas about what you would like to see happen. But if you want to create an opportunity for others to get involved, be prepared to listen. You might not always be able to make it work originally, but you can build on that and really understand what's important to the people around you. Find your tribe. After speaking with tree keepers before, it can feel like a hard slog sometimes to engage other people in being tree keepers or supporting the tiny forest. Start with the people who are interested and grow from there. So think about what would tempt you to get involved and build up from it, in order to increase and improve the inclusivity and diversity of your tribe at your tiny forest. You do need to start with a kind of support network for you. So build on those connections. Be social. People like to be social. So be positive and engaging, and maybe think about offering opportunities to motivate others through training or support. As you know, there's a whole range of resources and materials and recordings of webinars that have happened over the last few months that you can have access to. So if somebody is interested in getting involved, offer them the opportunity to watch some of the training. So yeah, make it easy, make it attractive, make it social, and make it timely. And celebrate those successes. So when things go well, make sure that the group knows that. And finally, think about clever communications. So how are you encouraging others to get involved? What is the language you're using? What are the channels? What are the methods that you can use to get people involved? And use all of these as a means to help you progress and to get more people involved. I'm going to pause at that point to catch up on some of the chat. So I'm sure none of what I've talked about is rocket science or particularly new, but what I would really like a chance now is for you guys to share with the group where you have found success stories in terms of engaging the people that you've had involved in the tiny forests. Is anybody going to be brave enough to share some of those stories? There we go. So let's have a look at the chat. Okay, so one of the challenges I think that's come up a few times is not just around getting people along to science days, but thinking about the sort of the tree care generally, and given how hot it is at the moment, particularly thinking about things like watering. So what have been the kind of mechanisms and the tools people have used to get people to involve in some of the sort of the maintenance of the tiny forest?
Perhaps has anyone been able to organise like a litter pick or a practical session around their forest?
Sorry, I was just trying to pick up the bravery to speak. Me and Maria, who's also here, had only started looking after Forest 24 about a month and a half ago.
Oh wow.
We've only been able to do really one visit to it. But we've been keeping in touch with our local council, but I've been quite disappointed in the way that they've been integrating into it. One of the charitable people as well, one of the providers, was supposed to be helping in scientific data logging and things like that. So we haven't been able to like get anything done. Nothing's been started. Nothing's been, you know, no integration, nothing really, no social aspects. Not sure if that will start with time, or I'm not sure, but
and so has that been particularly thinking about the connecting in with the council, or just kind of broader volunteers?
I have been in, as I said, I've been in communication with the council. It's Severn Trent Water and their forestry services team that's supposed to be looking after 24 for the first 2 years, but we haven't had any communications off the council, or there hasn't been any Severn Trent activity up there since it was planted in February. So me and my partner are just, as I said, doing the best we can. We've had one weeding visit up there so far, but that's all we've been able to do because of other obligations.
Okay, so it sounds like from your perspective, some Severn Trent input is kind of what you'll need, what's kind of needed, just in terms of, and is that in terms of helping with the connections to the kind of other kind of local community groups on the ground?
No, it's Severn Trent is more to do with maintenance. We don't really have the ability to spread it socially. It's just not our nature to interact socially, that kind of thing, if you know what I mean. I mean, even this is slightly awkward for me. But yeah, let's just say we could do with some help in that kind of aspect.
And I guess you're kind of relatively kind of a month and a half in, so well done for being part of this session now. Is there, from your perspective, is there, are you particularly interested in things like the science days and doing some of the data collection? Are you interested in? That's something that would appeal. Okay.
It's just that we haven't had any data logging or anything starting from our site. Just that it's just planted from February, and I think that was it. That was the last interaction that I think Earthwatch or anybody had with the site.
Okay, so that sounds like something that we can address and certainly look into. Does anyone, let's have a look, who've we got? So is it Hollis has talked, no, Helen, you've talked about having a weeding session and watering, and how have you recruited people along for that?
Hiya.
Hiya.
Sorry, I had kids on in the background, so I haven't got my camera on. I've just been managed to get them out the way now.
Oh, well done.
So, I mean, we had a really successful plant day back in November last year. So, I mean, we had around 140 people come, right from kind of people with very young children to people in their 70s come and plant. And then we did a little bit of recruiting at the time, and we've had various community days in Eggford Park where the tiny forest is. And so, and then just gradually talking to people. So I think initially we had around kind of 7 to 10 people, and there's definitely some which are more hardcore than others. So there's some that will generally show, and it's the same people that will show. I mean, in terms of, we're looking after the watering a bit, just for everybody else to know, I work for Freem Town Council. I'm the tree officer at Freem Town Council. So, you know, it's been a real delight to work with Earthwatch on this project. So from that perspective, Freem Council itself are quite heavily involved in promoting it and wanting the community to be part of it. So we've got an event next Tuesday in the park, and again, we're talking to people in September. So we're doing much more planting. We're having much more community involved in the park itself and holding events, which again sparks interest in the actual tiny forest. And we've got 2 schools which have been really involved in the science days. And I think there's going to be continued stuff. So I'm hoping to get some science kit from Ben and then hold some science days myself, now that I've had a little bit of experience with the team, Earthwatch team, and just get more and more people involved like that. So far so good. And you know, it's early days, and in some ways to get an interest in the forest, some people will lack a bit of vision. So obviously they're all tiny saplings right now, but you know, I think it is exciting to see it grow. So I'm doing kind of Facebook posts, and I'm in the tree keeper post. Obviously you're just talking to people that are already involved there, but we are doing posts out through the council as well, and again through the community groups. So there's a Eggford Park community group, Friends of Eggford Park, and there's another community group. So we are kind of linking in that way, and getting people's interest. So far so good.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I think it sounds like the actual planting day was very good for getting that initial interest, and kind of pulling people together.
I mean, yeah, I think, I mean, we involved the community groups that were already there. And I think us as a council, with all the green spaces that we have in Frome, community is a big part of that. We want the interest from the community that surround these green spaces, just for sustainability reasons, really. If they invest in it and they've got a choice, and they're involved from kind of picking the design to kind of roughly the location, then there's more investment in looking after it, and that's definitely a big thing for us. So again, on the actual planting day, we organised, I mean, we had kind of teas and coffees and fruit, and we had some community games as well for like, so people could just hang around and enjoy the day and make it more of a day rather than just plant a short time, so we can actually have these conversations with people. And I think that was really, really beneficial, to be fair. Otherwise, I think people, you know, when you've got 140 people and we had like roughly times a morning slot and an afternoon slot, people might just turn up, plant their allocated number, and then could just disappear again. But it just allowed a little bit more of an event, of a thing, and to have these conversations, and get contact details and then keep in touch. So I've got a Wild About Trees mailing list. So again, lots of people join that. So I will get information out through the council about Eggford Park and other green spaces that way as well. So again, it's just keeping at it, a slow drip feed.
Yeah, it sounds like David could do with a Helen to support him in Forest 24. And what have you, in terms of the people that have come along to the events, Helen, do you think it is that's kind of reflective of the different communities that surround the tiny forest sites, or are there some other kind of people that you want to get involved that you haven't had any success with yet?
I generally think, like, obviously the immediate community, there's been a lot of interest there because it's right on their doorstep. And we've done quite a bit of promotion in terms of the local schools. But there, again, on the plant day, there were people that weren't necessarily in Frome or living in Frome that were interested in the tiny forest concept, that did actually come to the day and be part of that and wanted to be tree planting. In terms of kind of other communities, I'm not, or other groups, I need to have a think about that, because I think, you know, again, we've got the schools linked in. One of the schools is a special school, and who did come to the science day, and I did put it in the chat. So in terms of accessibility, in terms of thinking about that for tiny forests, there was a couple of wheelchair users and one lad in a wheelchair, and sometimes the wood chip is quite difficult on the gates, but also having like making sure the biodiversity slabs is one on near the edge or the inside of the path, other in terms of a wheelchair going over saplings, or just making it really accessible. To have that in mind for future forests, it's worth thinking about that.
No, absolutely. And I know one of the things that our education team are doing at the moment as well is working with a number of different SEND schools to make sure that the kind of the resources that go with the activities are also as accessible as possible. But I absolutely take your point about the, you know, it's about the physical design, and I think the more we do the tiny forest, the better that we hopefully will get in terms of making them more accessible.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of other groups, I'm not too sure that other groups at the moment, that particularly where it is. I mean, there could be, in terms of, we could approach some businesses if there was further funding or further things for the park, or having them involved in terms of doing a bit of tree keeping, things like that, which, you know, giving their bit back. I need to have a little bit of a think, but generally so far, I mean, it was, again, the turnout was really good. In terms of the preparation for it, I did have a little bit of fear, because there did seem to be a lot of tree experts in Frome, and obviously it's quite, everyone likes their piece. So
yeah,
in terms of, oh, I don't think this methodology is the right way to do it, and obviously when you dig, you are disturbing like fungal systems, which again holding carbon. So it's the weighing up, and I think, you know, for anyone, it was useful to have some tips from Earthwatch to combat that a little bit. And certainly, you know, we're very much taking the approach that this is a science experiment. They are very new concept, they are young, and obviously if anyone says, obviously they were born in like Japan and then in India successful, it's a different climate, but obviously Netherlands, they've been quite successful, similar to us. So in terms of negativity with that, it's just having those skills to combat that. But again, having that approach, saying, look, this is an experiment, isn't it exciting? We get to try it out here. That's also turned people around a little bit, and trying to get people involved.
It sounds like you feel comfortable in having that conversation, Helen. Do you think that there's enough kind of resources to help support people to have those conversations?
I think in the startup, it'd be useful to have some like top tips in challenging conversations, or like concepts if people put out, in terms of if anyone questions it or why. That is useful to have that. I mean, I did a lot of research on tiny forests pre that, so I felt confident in having those conversations. But again, it is, you know, I think anyone about to plant one, or, you know, toying with the idea of having one, it is useful to have that from Earthwatch. And then I'm hoping from Ben, I think in engaging more people, is to have a science kit. So I know you were talking about the science team to see whether we could have one, Ben. But I think once we've got that in place, I'll do more advertisements and try and get people down so we can do some monitoring, physical monitoring down there. And I don't, obviously on the time, obviously there's a QR code that you can log on in your phone, whether that could be on part of the signage for tiny forests, so people can log on, or you could point people to the QR code that then immediately takes you to the site when you're on, so you can log in your butterfly count or other things, so you don't have to search for it online or have paperwork. That's just an idea, but I thought that's quite a good idea.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of that, Helen, just to play back on that. Obviously the ship's kind of sailed in terms of the actual sign that's out there, but each tiny forest will be, people will be able to get into do all their survey stuff just off the main page of the site, rather than having to go through logins and things like that to access the things. So we are kind of doing that, and yes, rest assured, you are top of the list for when we get our community science kits.
Thanks. Sorry, I know I keep banging on about it.
No, I know it's the right problem to have, as someone who's really, really keen to have it. And we just need our science guys to figure out exactly what's going in it.
Yeah.
And then we'll get it done.
Virginia, you mentioned that Hammersmith and Fulham Council are very involved. How have they been able to support the work that you've been doing?
Most of the engagement that I've had, I guess the 2 parks I'm involved with, of the 10 that Hammersmith and Fulham are committed to establishing, I think they've established 4 and a 5th one is on the way. And most of those I think are sponsored. I'm only involved specifically with the 2. Most of those, the staff from the climate team get engaged actively on the science days, and they promote it through their weekly newsletter out to residents who've signed up for the newsletter. I'm sure they're doing stuff on social media, but I don't do any social media, so I'm not seeing it if they are. But that they are always talking it up in city events. Whenever I've seen it, they're talking about the work with tiny forests as part of their broader climate commitment.
Okay, that sounds like it's been really, really helpful as well in terms of going forward. Is there any other particular activities that people have found a good way of getting people involved, perhaps beyond the sort of the planting day or the science days? Have people been able to run any other kind of events or activities that's helped kind of bring people into the tiny forest? Photo session, Ivana. So just in terms of encouraging people to take photos or to use the tiny forest as a photography venue. Oh, we can't hear. Oh, yeah, to use the tiny forest as an interesting backdrop. That's fair enough. And for a photo session. I know there's a lot of interest in having kind of nature-based photography. So I guess we could look at our tiny forests being a perfect venue for some great photography. You can have you can do the photos of children as they grow up, and they can be growing up through as the tiny forest grows as well. I know, Karen, obviously your tiny forest is based on a school site, but is there anyone who's had success at connecting in with a school where the tiny forest isn't on a school site? Okay, so Frome does. And again, I think that from what you said earlier, Helen, suggests that they were also involved in some of the planting and some of the kind of the ongoing watering. Okay. And any other kind of activities that that people have found are particularly good at sort of connecting people in?
I think community days, I'm just gonna, rather than type it, I'm just gonna say it, like just holding things either in the forest or just by the forest, or having those conversations. So and inviting the community there, even if it isn't anything to do necessarily with the forest, but having them there on site and they're having that interaction, then you can have conversations. But obviously having some kit to do some monitoring is nice. Or you could, if it's a park litter pick, that can involve the forest as well and check in on certain things. So and that brings out people as well. So
have any of you guys encountered good gym in your local area? I know they've got loads of operations around London and most big cities. Have any of you spoken to them? They're another one that might just be worth looking at. We're talking to their sort of national body, but it's a network of groups that keep fit by doing positive things within their community. So basically they will kind of, you know, organize a group run. They're really active in Barnet, down in London. They do group exercises. So they'll sort of, a bunch of them will get together, run across to the Tiny Forest site, do a bit of litter picking while they're there, and then run home again, which is an absolutely fantastic link to make, just sort of, you know, picking up Sarah's point about partners and allies and things like that. There's whole hosts of organisations that are out there.
And yeah, Good Gym seems to work really well because they're generally looking for activities that are quite physical. So yeah, any kind of maintenance session or any opportunity for them to run from the gym to the Tiny Forest and come back. So I guess if you think about where your Tiny Forest is located, see if there are any local gyms close to it, and quite often there'll be the Good Gym is attached to that. I know one of our work colleagues was a member of a gym in Oxford, and she introduced us to kind of that concept, and they're always looking for, you know, physical activities to kind of get active and get outside and involved with. Yeah, thanks, Ben. Any other one of the other things that I've been talking to locally around here is the Oxfordshire Mind group, and they are looking to develop a series of kind of well-being walks, and looking at whether we can kind of weave in walking past or two or round a Tiny Forest as part of that well-being walk. So again, it's kind of raises the profile of the Tiny Forest, potentially can bring a whole different set of people to the forest, and it really promotes that idea of the Tiny Forest as a safe space and a space that's good to be in. That's kind of tied to a couple of potential new sites in Oxfordshire that are coming up. But again, there may be a local mind group that you can connect into and see if they do things like kind of well-being walks along the way. Shona, is there anything particular that you found successful in Edinburgh around kind of connecting people in?
Hi. So the situation in Edinburgh is that myself and the secretary of the Friends of Campbell Park went to visit Mount Vernon Tiny Forest at Divya's request. Took a lot of photos because it's quite a new one, I think. And yeah, I mean, it's looking good, but so we're sort of peripheral to the Tiny Forest movement, if you like, very interested in what you're doing and what we can learn in terms of community engagement with regard to our own local Friends of Campbell Park group. But as to, that's why I said I've got really zero engagement with that particular Tiny Forest, because I really don't know who is running that local community there.
Okay, no, that's fine. But I think the kind of the idea of having kind of friends of groups and friends of park groups that are close to some of the Tiny Forest sites would also be a really good kind of avenue to explore in terms of if there's already an active group in that area, whether they would be interested in finding out a bit more about the forest and kind of looking at, you know, some of the benefits that they would get from being involved in the forest. I guess it depends on how active the friends of groups are, but it's yeah.
In our situation, we're right on the opposite side of the city, but that particular area where Mount Vernon is, it is close to two high schools, both Gracemount and Liberton, and it's also very close to Bridgend Farmhouse, which has got a lot of stuff going on that would be complementary. and the Inch Community Centre. So I think that there's the scope for whoever is involved in that particular tiny forest and wanting to promote it to do a lot of stuff locally, for sure.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. And often the first step is to kind of pull together a list of the local groups and organisations who kind of exist and operate around the site, both in terms of who you can physically see from the tiny forest site, but also what other groups exist or use the area around you, and then begin kind of reaching out to a wider set of community members to get them involved in the tiny forest site as well. Right, is there anything else anyone would like to share, just in terms of a sort of kind of particular experience they've had of connecting in? Oh, yeah, Ben might have to disappear off shortly. This session will be recorded and shared, and there's a number of other ideas and opportunities which we will post on the Tree Keepers Facebook page as ideas and suggestions about how you might engage more communities and get them more involved. But I would say the more opportunities that you have to engage people in the community and talk to them about what's important to them, then the more you'll have an understanding about what's going to work for your tiny forests. The irony being, each tiny forest is different, although it's the same in terms of the rationale behind it, but the audiences that connect to it will also be different. So please keep sharing and posting in the Tree Keepers book. The slides will be shared and the recording will be shared as well. And if anyone has any particular thoughts or ideas about other training and other webinars that would be useful in terms of next step, in terms of building your tribe, in terms of communicating to people and encouraging more volunteers, then please again share with Divya or share in the Facebook group. And enjoy your sultry, probably slightly warm evening wherever you may be around the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.